Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Mel and today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in August. Bear with me while filming this because I did actually test positive for COVID this morning and honestly I feel okay right now. Knock on wood, I'm okay. I'm doped up on Advil, but I'm okay. So while my voice holds and I'm able to, I did want to get some videos filmed for you guys, so just bear with me if I sound a little nasally. It's because I am. So without further ado, I guess let's just get into the books that I read in the month of August. August was also the month of the Magical Readathon, so we'll talk about how I did after we talk about TBR Bluff. August was the first month of TBR Bluff, and I think it went really well. I actually did complete my TBR by some stroke of a miracle and a lot of grinding. We got it done. So let's just go through each of the books on TBR Bluff and what I thought of them. So the first one was Patreon pick, and that was Bitter Twins by Jen Williams. This was the Backlist Book Club pick for the month of, I think it was July, but I read it in August. This is the second book in the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and the Winnowing Flame trilogy is really hard to explain, but essentially it follows this group of characters in a dying world, and they have been invaded over and over and over again by the worm people. When the worm people came in this last time, they killed the tree god that was the sustenance for this basically vampiric-like society, and now they are having to feed on humans instead of the sap from their tree, and this has caused them to get very ill over time. It has also caused humans to hate them, and we're dealing with kind of the politics and the aftermath of that and the fear that these creatures are going to come back. I am really enjoying this trilogy. It's leaning more sci-fi now than I thought it would. I do have a vlog from where I read this book, and I'll put it up in the corner up here somewhere, but I'm having a good time with this series. The second book, I really didn't like the beginning very much. I felt like it was very slow, a little too drawn out. Then we hit about the 60% mark and things just started to happen, and I really enjoyed it from there. We have had the live show about this already, and Cassidy made some really good points that made me like it a little bit less than I initially did while just reading and finishing it, because they were some pretty good points. So if you've read the book or you don't mind spoilers and you want to hear all about that, definitely go over to Covers with Cassidy's channel and check out the live show. But overall, I gave this one a low 4-star read. There were elements of it that I did like better than the first book, and the first book kind of had that first little bit slower pacing for me throughout, whereas this one really ramped up toward the end. So I'm excited to see how book 3 evolves and finishes off the story. I think it's going to lean a lot more sci-fi than it is fantasy, which is one thing that Cassidy wasn't loving about it, but oddly enough, I don't mind. Then we have a friend pick, and I asked Rachel what she wanted me to read, and her pick was In the Shadow of Lightning by Brian McClellan. This is one that just recently came out a few months ago. It is by the same author that did the Powder Mage trilogy, and I had been really looking forward to reading it because I'd heard some really good things about the Powder Mage trilogy. This one follows many different perspectives, but kind of our central perspective is Demir, who is a prince that was really put in his place while he was young, and he has since escaped, but when his mother dies, he's called back to the fold as the new head of the guild family, and he finds out that the sustenance that helps them create the glass for their magic is starting to die. This magic system was really cool because it's a little bit of a mix between Jade City and Mistborn. Like Mistborn, we have glass that give people different powers depending on which glass it is, but like Jade City, the magic is worn, not ingested, and if you get too much of it, or if you're not someone that is capable of taking in too much glass, then it can actually poison you. So I did find that really interesting. Unfortunately, this book was just okay. It was a 3-star read. It was alright. There wasn't anything inherently wrong with it, but the characters were really just there to move the plot forward. They didn't have a lot of oomph to themselves until toward the end, which would have been fine, but the plot moved really slow, and I wasn't overly interested in that as well. So it was just generally okay. The writing style was good. It was way too long. But I think I might pick up the second book. I haven't fully decided on that one yet, but I did like the writing style enough, and I looked at some other reviews that didn't love this one but loved the Powder Mage trilogy, so I'll definitely give that one a try. Then we have My Witch's Brew and the Dragon book pick, and that was The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. I also read this in the vlog where I read Bitter Twins. The Chorus of the Dragon series, I cannot explain to you. I I don't know how to explain it to you without giving spoilers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the blurb of book 1 so that I don't accidentally give spoilers. It says, when destiny calls, there's no fighting back. Kieran grew up in the slums of Kurd, a thief and a minstrel son, raised on the tales of long-lost princes and magnificent quest. When he is claimed against his will as the missing son of treacherous prince, Kieran finds himself at the mercy of his new family's ruthless power and plays and political ambitions. Practically a prisoner, Kieran discovers that being a long-lost prince is nothing like what the storybooks promised. The storybooks lied about a lot of things too: dragons, demons, gods, prophecies, true love, and how the hero always wins. Then again, maybe he isn't the hero after all, for Kieran is not destined to save the Empire, he's destined to destroy it. So I found book 1 gloriously confusing is the way that I keep putting it, and it is very, very similar in this second book. We do have a similar gimmicky way of it being told, but I didn't overall mind that. This one follows pretty much the same timeline of events from book 1, just in a different perspective, and I gave it 4 stars. I had a good time, but I didn't just absolutely love it. It was a low 4-star for me. I think I do prefer book 1 over this one, mostly for a couple of different reasons. Janelle to me just was a little bit flat. I admired her character, but she just felt very one-dimensional in my mind, so I am hopeful that as we develop and see her more in later books, that will start to change. There was also one thing in this book that kept kind of being hammered over and over and over again, making the story very repetitive, which I did not love. So overall, low 4-star read. Still enjoyed the story, the storytelling, the intricacies, the demons. There are a lot more demons in this book. The dragons, there are more dragons in this book. Overall, had a really good time with it, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with Memory of Souls. Then we had a book with an isolated setting, and that is Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I wanted to read this one because I read the indie version, and according to the author, you really needed to read this new version before picking up Atlas Paradox. I don't see why she said that, but we'll get back to that. This follows a group of 6 individuals that all have been tapped to having the most special, unique magic, and they have been offered a place in the Alexandrian Society. When they get there, they find out that there are 6 of them currently, but in the end, only 5 can be inducted, and they're going to learn and defend this library in Alexandrian Society until they are inducted to find out which 5. I liked it when I read it a pretty good bit. I did find it a little slow, a little pretentious, but it's supposed to be. And I gave it 4 stars. On reread, I listened to it and did not love a lot of the perspectives, the audiobook. They just didn't do a very good job of editing everything together and keeping it cohesive, so that hindered my enjoyment a little bit. But I think just having already known what was going on and the ending having such a big impact on me the first time, now that I knew the ending, it didn't have as big of an impact, and so this ended up being a 3-star read. I am curious to see how it progresses in book 2. One of 2 things is going to happen. Either it's going to really rev up and the story is going to just fly forward, or we're going to get more of the same and I'm going to be really bored. So I'm curious to see how book 2 shakes out. I think it comes out in October, so we'll get to find out sooner rather than later. And then the last prompt for TBR Bluff was Thriller, and that ended up being Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. This is also the Book Troop book club pick for the month of August. First, let's talk about what this one is about. This one follows Paris, who has married a very wealthy older man. He is a comedian, and she goes on a yoga retreat and gets home one night and realizes and goes up to check on him and finds him dead via straight razor in the bathtub. Well, of course, the police think that she did it and they take her into custody. Then we also have a flashback timeline where this mom, Ruby, and her daughter, Jolie, and they have a really crappy relationship. And one day her mom, Ruby, is convicted of being the Ice Queen killer for killing her boyfriend, I guess is a good way to put it. This book has a lot, and these 2 crimes are very, very similar. This book has a lot of trigger warnings for sexual abuse and even domestic abuse, so just be aware of that going in. I thought that conversation was really interesting. I liked the way that was done. I even liked the way that it was kind of flashing back and forth between different timelines and different settings without really telling you. It wasn't confusing. I was able to stay on the same page, and I thought that was interesting. Unfortunately, I was just so bored in this book. I think it had a good idea, it just was not executed well. I just never could really get on the same page. I was just bored, and I felt like I saw everything coming from a mile away, which certainly didn't help the boredom because I wasn't guessing, I wasn't thrilled. I already kind of felt like I knew what was going on, and for the most part, I was right. So I ended up giving this one a 2.5 star, which is sad because I really enjoyed Jar of Hearts, but this one just didn't do it for me. Then I also needed to read Nemesis Games by James S.A. Corey. This is the 5th book in the Expanse series. I am reading this with Rachel and my dad, and we're reading a book every other month. And this series is just a very large scope space opera series. We have a lot of changing perspectives. We have one main core crew. If you're looking for just one of the classic space operas, then I would definitely give this one a try. I enjoyed this 5th book in the series. I have given most of these books 4 stars and liked them, but just haven't been quite as in love with them since the 2nd book. There are a lot of shifting perspectives, which is hard for me to kind of get behind. This one didn't actually shift perspectives a lot, even though we're getting characters' perspectives that we never have before. They're characters that have been there since the beginning, so I really enjoyed that. This one took me a little bit longer to get into. Usually it's about 200 pages. I would say it was more halfway in this one. And there was one particular character's storyline that we're getting a lot of backstory for her, and a lot of backstory in all these characters in general, but with it being the second to the last in this story arc, I don't know, I felt like we should have gotten that a lot earlier to really feel the punches, and that was frustrating to me. I don't really understand why we would get such a big, massive piece of her one book before the end of the series. Now, I know these are 9 books, but the last 3, I think, are their own story arc. They're set way in the future, different characters, so I'm considering this character's arc to be 6 books. So that was a little annoying. I don't really understand that, and unfortunately because of that, it just didn't work for me, but I gave this one a 4 star. I still had a really good time, and I'm still really looking forward to the 6th book in the series. Then I also needed to read Nettle and Bone for the Officially Unofficial Late Night Crew Club, and sadly Cassidy and I did both end up DNFing this one. This is a whimsical fairy tale-like story where our main character is given the task of doing 3 impossible tasks in order to try to save her sister from this abusive prince. And it reads very fairy tale-esque. I agree with Cassidy when she said it's kind of like you're sitting around a campfire and having a story being told to you. Because of that, it wasn't super immersive, and I just got pretty bored. I didn't really feel like there was a lot interesting happening, and so I ended up DNFing it about 40% in, which is sad because I've read 1 Tea Kingfisher and absolutely loved it. I've read 2 that were just mediocre, and now I've DNF'd 1. So curious to see where I lie on the Tea Kingfisher scale, because I was convinced that because I loved Hollow Places so much, I was going to enjoy everything that she's written. And unfortunately, so far, that has not been the case. And then I read 2 books just for Becca's 24-hour Patreon readathon that I didn't have time for and shouldn't have read, but I did it anyway. And the first one is Daughter of Redwinter by Ed McDonald. This one is a ghosty story about our main character who can see ghosts, and it does have like some demon undertones. She's stolen away from her family and she's living at this compound when these mages come and are looking for a woman that she has recently saved. And when they're there trying to get a hold of something that she's stolen, chaos ensues and a lot of people die, and they take her with them. Once she gets to their Redwinter base, she finds out that there's a lot more going on and a lot more for her to learn than she originally thought, and she's kind of trying to unweave this mystery. I liked this. Again, it was one of those told at you dream-like stories rather than being super immersive. I never really completely got on board with the main character. Something happens to her in the very beginning as a plot device that makes her very stoic, and I didn't absolutely love it. I kind of understand why it was there, but I wish it had been removed and dealt with a lot sooner. I think I would have connected with her more and had a better time. And the ending was good, but the pacing in the middle was just, it was too fast. Slow down really fast again. So I enjoyed this one, but I am not sure if I want to pick up the sequel. I think I will. I ended up giving this one a 3 star, and I'm very curious to see what happens in the sequel. So I think I will read it, but pacing was off for me, connecting was off for me a little bit, but this would be the perfect September-October book because it has demons and ghosts. And last but not least, I read The Blood Trials by Eve Davenport. This is a sci-fi fantasy blend about our main character who is struggling with the loss of her grandfather, and she finds out that he may not have had a heart attack like she originally thought and may have been murdered. So she decides to go into the blood trials to become one of the highest military elite in order to solve his murder. This one ends up taking a much bigger scope than that in the end. I felt like this started out very young adult. Our main character was very, I know everything. No one can beat me. I am the strongest. I am the best. And she needed to be knocked down a peg or two, and that did happen. I do feel like the writing and the characters did grow up pretty quickly in this book. They are 1920, so I would classify it more as new adult, I guess, than young adult or super adult. It is pretty graphic and gory, but I'm not one of those people that thinks that graphicness makes something adult and not graphicness makes it young adult. It's more of a tone thing for me. This one was a very young adult in the first third in tone and then does age up. I liked the relationships between the characters in here. I did find the trials very, very interesting. I do think that the last 2/3 of this book, probably 100 pages, should have been in a different book. I think that this one wrapped up really, really nicely about, I don't know, about 350, 400 pages in, and then the story just kind of took a serious turn and kept moving. And I think that that would have been served better in a different book rather than putting it in this one, because it did feel a little bit rushed and out of context. But overall, I still liked this one a lot. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm excited for the sequel. And then, actually forgot a book. The last one that we need to talk about is Glow by Raven Kennedy. This is the 4th book in the Plated Prisoner series. I'm reading this for the Fan Row Book Club, hosted by Sahar from Basically Bookish Reads. This one, it follows our main character, Auron, who is completely made of gold, and she is the pet of King Midas. One day when he goes to conquer another kingdom, she goes off to meet him and is taken over by pirates and has to kind of figure out how to live her world out of this cage. This series has not been one that I've loved as much as I thought I would. I've given most of the books either a 2.5 or a 3 star. So far, I'm only about halfway in, or I'm right at halfway into Glow, so I will finish it by the end of the month. And I'm enjoying this one. A lot of the beginning was from a different character's point of view, which I have greatly enjoyed. This book focuses a lot on grief and like Stockholm Syndrome, and it's very, very character driven, and I was expecting more like fantasy romance side of things, so I haven't just loved the direction that it's taken, but this one is seeming to widen the scope a lot. These books are way too long. I mean, there's just no reason that a fantasy romance needs to be 700 pages, but other than that, I'm having a decent time. I'm thinking this one will shape up to be a 3.5 star read, and if it does, that will be the highest I have given a Plated Prisoner book, so looking forward to finishing out that one. Okay, so now let's talk about how all of these fit into the magical readathon. Are you looking at your newest necromancer? Yes, no, maybe. I am happy to report that I did finish all of my prompts. So let's talk about what each one fit. For animal studies, I needed to get an O for ordinary, and that was to study Familiars, a book with an animal companion. And for this one, I'm actually going to be able to use Glow by Raven Kennedy, and it will be done by the end of the month, so we can check that one off. And then the next class I needed was Spells and Incantations. I needed an ordinary and a qualified for this one. For ordinary, it was Spell Recolor, use a color wheel, and for my color wheel I got gray and red. The Name of All Things, it has a little bit of gray. I know it's mostly black, but I promise there's gray in there somewhere. So we can check this one off. And then for qualified, I had Incantation, Echo, Steal a Book, and I stole Bitter Twins off of Cassidy's TBR. Check mark there. For Conjuration, I needed an ordinary, a qualified, and a distinguished. For ordinary, we had Foundations of Necromancy, read a necromantic book. G said to kind of stretch this for necromancy themes, so I was able to use Daughter of Redwinter by Ed McDonald for this one. And then qualified was Tails the Bones Tale, bones on the cover. I used Nettle and Bone. I don't think you were technically allowed to DNF, so I may need to quickly finish that one out in order to complete the readathon, but I only had like an hour left of the audiobook, so I can easily do that. And then for Distinguished, it was Raise the Dead Theory, reread a book, and for that one I reread Atlas 6. Then my next class was Restoration, Object Restoration for Ordinary. This was a book with a single object on the cover. and I ended up swapping this one out for Things We Do in the Dark because her face is the only thing on the cover here, and I felt like that counted. And then for my last class, we had Demonology, and this was Ordinary Imp Wrangling, Read a Fantasy, and for this one, I got to use this one, Into the Shadow of Lightning by Brian McClellan. So that's it. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of August. I felt like I had a pretty successful reading month. I was able to get a lot done that I was not real sure I was going to get finished when we were sitting at this spot a week ago, but I did get it all finished, and I'm super happy. I'm a necromancer. Whoop whoop. So let me know down in the comments what your favorite read of August was. Did you complete your TBR, or was it just one of those months? Because I feel like everyone just had a rough reading month in the month of August. I don't know why, but I just feel like it was a struggle for a lot of people. So I'm super happy to have completed my TBR. Check out my next TBR from TBR Bluff. I'll also put up in here somewhere if you want to know what I'm reading in the month of September. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you wanna, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!